Welcome back to the Haven Homestead podcast, where we learn and grow together on our way to living more sustainable lives. My name is Chris, and this is episode 55, and today we're going to be talking about a couple caller questions. It's been a long time since I've been on, and I apologize for my absence. My new job has taken quite a bit of my time, and also I sit in front of a computer more, so it's kind of hard to come home and sit in front of a computer again for a few more hours. It just seems like the abuse goes on, where before my old job I never sat in front of a computer, so it was a little bit easier to get onto the computer and spend a couple hours. It didn't seem like it was such a huge difficulty, but this new one's proving much more difficult to get onto the online and record a podcast. And now that we're in Airbnb season, big time, Lindsay's been really busy with that and not able to help me record any podcasts either. We've had guests almost every day that we have open, and it's been very good for us. We've enjoyed our guests and a lot of people from different backgrounds, and it's been a really good opportunity. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get into the two questions I had called in, or messaged in, I guess. And if you want to message us, then please go to www.havenhomestead.com, and you can either do the contact us section and that'll send us an email, or you can write a comment on one of the blog or one of the podcast posts. So the first question we're going to tackle here is from Nathan in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. He's a Yooper up there by Lake Superior, which is obviously better than the other ones. And he wanted to ask about adding clay. He's got very sandy soil up there, and he wanted to know if he could add clay to the soil to increase water retention and make it a little bit more of a balanced soil. Well, everything that I found mostly was about adding adding sand to clay soil, but to add enough clay to sandy soil, I think you would have to add a lot and the right amount, and I see it being very very costly. I would caution against it, and if you have a lot of organic matter, and he did say that all he's seen when he's researched it is just to add organic matter, and I would add my 2 cents to that, is just add some organic matter. My mom has very sandy soil where she lives, and when she started doing deep mulch beds and lasagna style gardening, and she even tried the straw bale gardening. I have an episode with her where we talk about these sort of things. She found that her garden did very well. And the funny thing is where we come from in Idaho, there is often sandy soil that the farmers love because you can grow potatoes in it and harvest them easily, and sugar beets and carrots and things like that need the sandy soil so that the roots and tubers grow better, whereas the clay soil, it constricts them and they don't grow as big, or they grow in weird shapes, or just don't grow. So I would just add my voice to the others, Nathan, that just go ahead and add a lot of organic matter. One thing that people have caution against, and if you've ever looked into this topic, they say if you add sand to clay or clay to sand, it will turn it into a concrete, because what the ground has different stratas, the soil has different stratas, and as the time goes on and rain falls, and it layers itself, and when you go in there and you till it up, it destroys that strata. We go in there with the shovel and break up the soil just to so that the roots can get in and there's better water penetration. That's all that we really do to our garden. And right now it's the 7th of July, and we live in a northern climate, so our plants are a little bit further behind. Some people are already harvested their whatever's tomatoes or something and moved on. I know my mom, she lives in a warmer climate. They can plant earlier and they're already harvesting tomatoes. Well, we have lots of green tomatoes on, but our tomatoes are, neck high to me, and I'm 6 foot tall, and our corn is up to my waist, and so that's, you know, they're doing very well for not having anything tilled, and we just add rabbit manure for our fertilizer, and they've all been doing very well. I would just caution against putting any sand or clay in there, because when you mess up that strata, you can make a compaction problem. And now all the little particles of clay have to go and find their little spot again, and the sand has to, will act. It might have a little bit better drainage, but for you to add enough sand or enough clay to make a big difference isn't very viable, isn't very sustainable, to say the least. And so adding the organic matter is a sustainable option that will pay dividends for years down the road. So add organic matter. That is my 2 cents worth. And then Karen wanted to ask about canning varieties. And when you go into a pantry, there's nothing better than going into your pantry and seeing all these things that you've canned, all these canned vegetables and meats and all these labors of your own two hands, and then sitting down to a meal with these things that you grew, months after, maybe even, years after they were in the garden. It's just so neat to do. And we like to we raise meat rabbits, so we can the meat. We also make chicken broth when we butcher chickens, use the feet to make broth. And so we have canned meat, broth. These are all building blocks of really tasty and nutritious meals. Beans are one of the best things to can. Along with beans, canning things, there's beans, peas, carrots, asparagus, tomatoes, squash. Lindsay, last year we had a lot of green tomatoes that didn't, cherry tomatoes that didn't turn ripe when it started to freeze. So she canned a bunch of green tomatoes, and we used that in a soup the other day. Squashes, beets, cucumbers, in the forms of pickles, corn. Those are all really good things to can. You can even can dried beans. The Prairie Homestead at prairiehomestead.com has a really good article on how to can beans, and they can the dried beans. You add water, but you start with the beans, and you have to have a pressure canner. Now, our pressure canner, we're kind of holding off until it's time to pressure can all the meat, and everything will probably pressure can all at once. But what a great opportunity, because dried beans are really inexpensive at the store. You can get a pound for really inexpensive. And canned beans are quite a bit more expensive because someone's gone through the process. It's the convenience of it. And plus, if you're going to be storing something, you only have a few different options, like freezing or drying or canning are the ones that we typically use. I'm sure there's more. You could put a bunch of salt on it or go old school on it. But for today's day and age, canning things or freezing things are the two main options that people use. Oh, and drying. I'm making jerky is pretty common, but those are the main things that people do. With that in mind, Karen was asking, what are some of the best canning varieties? And that is kind of a subjective question, because it seems like a lot of people have different ideas on what are the best canning varieties. So any one of your garden beans will probably can really well. She said that she's going to raise 5 kinds of beans this year, and as long as they grow and produce lots of fruit, then I think that taste wise, and it's all really dependent on the person. some of the things that we really like to can is, like I said, the green tomatoes and the meats. Those are some of the ones that we've really done. We've also done a lot of jams and jellies because of here where we live. There's a lot of wild blackberries, wild huckleberries, salmon berries, thimbleberries. So we get a lot of opportunity to can jams and jellies. So in my opinion, if you're growing anything and canning it, you're on the right track. As for beans, it's just up to you to decide which ones are best. So with that answer, if you guys have any more questions, listeners of the podcast, Havenites, if you guys have any questions, then I really appreciate you asking them and sending it in and giving me the opportunity to answer them. Once again, I apologize for being so long since I've talked to you guys. We have 54 episodes out there, so if there's anything that I haven't covered and you're still interested in, please let me know. I'm going to give you a few updates to our garden and some of the things that I've learned lately. I guess you could say a couple homesteading hacks. Well, one homesteading hack in particular. So I went over to a friend's house. He was butchering chickens. He had about a dozen roosters to process, and I was helping him on the slaughter side, and he was doing some of the other parts. We had an automatic feather plucker and a kill cones. And I never used the kill cones before because I only do 1 or 2 chickens at a time, and so it doesn't really make sense for me to have the kill cones. But they're nice because they kind of constrain the chicken as when they're hanging. They're hanging upside down, and by the time that you get to it, most of the blood's drained, and it just works really well. So, I'm sorry if you're sensitive to this sort of thing, but it is homesteading, and it is the facts of life, raising your own food. And if you eat meat, then something's got to die sooner or later. So we butchered these chickens, and one thing that was really neat that he did was in the scalding pot, he added some Dawn dish soap. And when you put the chicken in, you just kind of swish it around a little bit for a few seconds. He brings his temperature up about 140 degrees and swishes the animal around in there, chicken around in there. And when you pull it out, it doesn't smell like wet feathers, which is really nice. It smells, kind of like Dawn dish soap. So I thought that was a really nice thing. And he said it also kind of cuts through any oil they might have in their feathers or the dirt and stuff. And so when you swish it around in there, you pull it out, test a couple of feathers, make sure it's well done, then throw it in the plucker, and the plucker spins it around and plucks all the feathers out, and you snag it out of there and cool the carcass, and then move it on to the evisceration station. So it was really neat opportunity to kind of see a more production style. We did 12 chickens in no time at all, and it's kind of interesting to see it on a different style where I hand pluck, and I don't use the kill cones. I do the kill on my lap, and just really interesting to see a different style. And it was there's some things I think like that Dawn dish soap that I'm really gonna use next time we process any chickens. We went down to a friend's house. Another thing that I've learned is we went down to a friend's house, and he's moving away, so he's having an estate sale, or big yard sale, I guess you could say. I don't know. I thought estate sales were for people that have died, but he's calling it an estate sale. So, he has this hardy kiwi plant, and I thought it was a grape because of how big the base was, and he built this arbor out of 6x6 pressure-treated wood, and it's probably, I'd say 40 or 50 feet long, this arbor, by 10 feet wide, and he planted his grapes along it, and then at the end, he has 2 kiwis, and these kiwis have almost overtaken the grapes. They're just, 30 feet long, and these kiwis, and the base are probably 3 inches in diameter, on the base of the plant. They're just ginormous. He says there's lots of fruit, but it doesn't always ripen in our climate. And he says it's just taking over. So if you have a spot that you don't really mind if the kiwi runs rampant, then go ahead and plant there. But just a word of warning that if you're going to plant hardy kiwis, they can take off like crazy. And granted, these plants are 20 years old, so they've been there for a little bit and had lots of time to grow. But he really, really didn't like the kiwi. He said he regrets planting it. And that made me kind of cautious on it, but I still want to plant some kiwi because I like the fruit. They're the grape kiwi that you can just eat. You don't have to skin them or anything. They're really small, but really tasty. And they invite us to come over and take whatever cuttings we would like off these plants and, propagate our own. But it's just really, really interesting. I wouldn't have thought that kiwi was so vigorous and so, could be, I guess if left to its own devices, could be very, damaging. Something like if you plant on the side of your house, that it would just take over. I think that's the same thing that people didn't realize about the ivy. And man, that is a blight out here in Western Washington. It's perfect conditions for it, and it just grows like crazy. It grows up trees and kills them, and it's just a nuisance in my opinion. One of my least favorite plants. Well, I think those are the two things that I'm going to touch on right now. I'm going to get another subject for you and try to get a podcast out as soon as I can. In the meantime, keep being awesome and let me know if you've had any successes or failures or things you've learned. I'll do the same for you. If you want to head out to my Instagram, I'm going to post some pictures today of the garden, and I'm going to go out and do it right now before breakfast so that I don't get distracted and get on to doing my own thing. So I'm going to get this edited and sent out, and then I'm going to go take some pictures of the garden for you. And we are on Instagram as The Haven Homestead. The Haven Homestead. Haven, Haven, Homestead. So go ahead and check us out. I've put a few posts today, some back posts that I haven't posted yet, but that I should have posted already. But anyway, now I'm going to go out and take some pictures of the garden. So once again, this has been the Haven Homestead Podcast, where we learn and grow together on our way to living more sustainable lives. Thanks for listening.